Yes, so I think we are live. So we would be just beginning in a couple of minutes time.
Good to see you, Ketan.
Great
Yeah.
to see you, Debu. So I think we are just checking the last minute up. So as I can hear the what you say the countdown 10, 9, 8. This thing our team doing. So as soon as we go on to the 0, 1, I think we should be able to start in a couple of minutes. Yeah. So just a final check on the audio.
Okay. Can you hear me correctly?
Yes. Yes, we are checking up with the YouTube audiences. Are they able to hear us? Yes, I think they are able to hear us. So I think we can begin now. So welcome Debu. First of all, welcome everyone who is joining us on our first episode of the Neural Networking with Ketan podcast series. A very good morning to the folks on the West Coast, good afternoon to the folks on the East Coast, and good evening or good night to the folks who are joining us from India or from the subcontinent, basically. So, we welcome you all again. I am Ketan Pethankar, co-founder and CTO of Converge.ai. At Converge, we help organizations infuse AI into their businesses. We have been around for 5 years now, and you would say that why we have been here for 5 years, and why did we decide to start the podcast now after 5 years? So what has happened in last 5 years is that AI now has become mainstream. That is for the first and foremost reason of starting this. Second is there is a lot of activity going around AI in enterprises that we are observing as an organization as we are starting to serve more and more enterprise customers. And thus what has led is there is a curiosity quotient around AI overall and for foremost with the enterprise folks. So we said that why not we call upon experts in AI like Debu. Today we have Debu, and we will have some more experts coming in, and we will discuss some of the most what you say topics which generate curiosity for people who are following this AI journeys. So today we have with us Debu Chatterjee, founder of Confer AI, an AI governance, risk, and compliance platform that enables enterprises to manage AI safely. Debu is a seasoned tech leader and innovator with more than 30 years of experience in the tech industry. Currently, he is leading Confer AI, a startup that practices governance, risk, and compliance from an AI perspective and accelerates confident AI adoption in enterprises. Prior to this, Debu also co-founded DX Continuum, a pioneering AI company acquired to seed ServiceNow's AI roadmap, where after acquisition, Debu served as the head of engineering platform and AI. So Debu, we would be discussing over the next 50 minutes or so with you topics around AI governance and responsible AI. And thank you for giving us your valuable time to be here with us today.
You're welcome, Ketan. Happy to be here and talk about AI governance. This is something we have been at Confer. We have been working for about almost 24 months now. Some things are moving rapidly in the governance area. A lot of the work we are doing builds upon the experience we have had, like co-founder Bhaskar and I had with both with ServiceNow, and prior to that was DX Continuum and FICO. So yes, happy to share that on this podcast with you and your guests.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Devu, again. So let's begin with some of the questions that we had for you, and these are also curated from the link that we ran and took the survey from LinkedIn as well. So it's a mix of questions from our end as well as the community. So the first one which I want to ask is, AI landscape has seen sudden spurt in activity in the last year or so, especially due to Gen AI and Chat GPT revolution that we have had. With AI becoming mainstream, there is a lot of hype and significant reality to the AI, Gen AI use cases. What has been your experience like?
That's a very good, inflection point which we have seen about a year ago, and OpenAI released the GPT model, and along with that, a tool to use the product in much more friendlier way. You don't need to be a data scientist to use that large language foundational model. With that, we saw a spurt of other foundational models coming into the picture. So essentially, this is a story of where foundational models are becoming the key drivers of making applications use AI for their own decision making. The class of applications which can take advantage of this has expanded significantly. A larger volume of information exists in unstructured form. It could be text, it could be video, it could be images. Capturing and using that for normal enterprise users or consumer users was something which, and to to be used in a way in which individual consumers can use it, was something which was hard, and for programmers or for people who are marketing folks, or maybe there are folks who are creating applications, or even like folks who are authors and writers who wants to have say a nice illustration of the work they are doing, they are writing about. All of those are now possible. A host of companies have exploded into the space, building upon the work which the foundational model companies are doing. And that is a lever which can now be used to generate a variety of work. So from predictive nature of ML AI, we have really moved into the generative side of the house. So now we can create summarized reports, we can answer questions, we can create new images, we can create new videos. Of course, both have good use, and sometimes it can also be used in a non in the way you don't expect it to happen. And so there are a whole bunch of things happening around this space. So,
That was quite an
yeah.
elaborate response you gave. So you said a very interesting, what you say, point there regarding the information that is being generated across, be it unstructured data or structured data, or some other what you say data which is semi-structured data. So all kinds of this data is going to now either being generated or being used for the foundational models, or it is going to get stored in the data warehouses or some kind of other storage systems. So that means that all the enterprises, they will have to follow some kind of compliances regarding the artificial intelligence models, or the storage of data, or the way the data is being used along with the models. So that brings me to the next question, that AI compliance laws are something that not a lot of us talk about. Can you please tell us a bit more about AI compliance laws that companies should be aware of?
Yeah. So that's what's happening today is that because AI is going to be very ubiquitous in its use, and what I posit always a part of the reason of the confer existing is that all software is going to use AI in some fashion, whether you're building the software in your company or you're procuring a software from outside. You are going to use AI in some fashion, and AI will going to make some decisions for you based on the data. So, and that decision obviously can bring a certain amount of risk to your organization. So the reason why compliance laws are becoming compliance to directives or laws are becoming interesting is no longer the business processes which are being digitized or software which is acquired. Like you could buy an HR software, you can buy a workflow software, you can buy an ERP software. They also end up using AI, and all of these are now using a certain amount of decisioning based on data and for you. So as organizations have to be aware that they are not use of AI is not bringing additional risk, and those risks can be with respect to existing statutory laws. For example, if you are in if a marketing software using AI, then a marketing software may actually have to still continue to be compliant to the regulations which exist from, say, CFPB or FTC or some of the other statutory bodies in US. In addition to that, the national bodies or national some governments like EU has coming up with their own EU AI Act, primarily to ensure that use of AI doesn't have an adverse impact on humans, and use of that doesn't affect certain segments of the humans in a disproportionate way. And then some other countries like US, there you have standards body like NIST, which has an AI risk management framework, which describes the ways in which you can address the risk which is now being created, and you can manage and mitigate them. It is not an act; it does not enforce a penalty or an ability for you to be called out and that you did not follow something. So different organizations, different countries are doing different ways. They are approaching it in different ways. In the US, for example, even though NIST is going to have a AI regulation, and I said the other statutory bodies will have their own rules. If you are in certain industry, for example, if you are in insurance industries are heavily regulated by the state and the state in which you sell insurance. Now, states are coming out with their own variations of an AI law. So you can always think about the proliferation that 50 states have 50 different AI laws, and a large insurance company has to operate in 50 states. They have to ensure that they are compliant to all the 50 different state laws, as well as maybe a U.S. law, U.S. not law, or a directive at this point, and maybe international laws in which countries which they operate. So the set of compliance, set of regulations to which you are going to need to be compliant to is only going to increase. They already, in US, especially in banking and financial system, heavily regulated. They already have something called alphabet super regulations A to Z. Many of those will continue to exist even if you use AI, and probably be a little bit more strictly enforced to ensure that the AI part driven modules in your software are not continue to be compliant to these regulations A to Z in whichever industry they are in. So that's the entire gamut of compliance laws and regulations and directives, which in a nutshell, which is showing up. And the regulations are only going to increase, literally. And use of AI is going to increase, so the number of assets on which you're going to run these regulations are going to come. The multiplier effect of a regulations times the number of assets is also going to expand significantly, not expound. Sorry. So that's where we are around regulations. Of course, I'm happy to talk more about what are the about what each could bring in and what are the areas in which we are looking at. Some are talking about AI as applications. Some are probably directed towards AI models, and some are probably directed towards data and data which is being used within AI applications or within other applications. So there are different ways in which you want to look at the regulations and see that that as a company, you have a governance playbook which you can then run and ensure the company's AI posture is always the right one, and you can manage and mitigate the different set of risks which can be brought in.
This was a cool know-how to know regarding the key takeaway that you mentioned was the governments are also coming up with their own regulation. Like you mentioned, the NIST AI framework is there, and European Union, how they are going about the AI compliance things. So this would be a very interesting space for even the enterprises to watch out from a compliance perspective, because they would like to make sure that they are following the compliance laws correctly whenever they are deploying any model or they are using any model in production. So this brings me to the next one, which is connected, is why are governments so conscious about AI ethics? You also mentioned a couple of examples. So what kind of impact can be unaudited? What kind of impact can unaudited AI have? Are governments overly careful, or how they are looking at the space? So we have had instances that we have seen regarding the deep fakes. Then we have had instances where people were trying to see how avatars can be used from a media production perspective, or we have had these debates where some art was generated by artificial intelligence, and people were having discussions who will do the copyright on the art.
Yeah, so different governments are taking different approaches to, in my opinion, ensure that the use of AI is being done with the right interest in mind, right? So only European EU AI Act is probably an act which is enforceable, which will become enforceable shortly, and may have a punitive component to it. They are following it up with a liability directive, right? So if the liability directive comes forward or becomes a law, then it becomes extremely important that organizations have kind of a record of how they use AI inside their applications, and what were the steps which were taken to ensure that the AI was properly tested, the data wasn't used to provide adverse impact on a certain set of consumers, and the very use of AI was something which is the right thing to do. Now, ethics is a very is like a very broad term, and for an operational reasons, I would say ethics typically for an organization would derive from their mission and vision statement. Now, mission that should derive the ethics, but to make it tangible for an organization's members to be doing the right things according to what the mission and vision of the state of the company is, a company's legal compliance team or the risk team needs to probably have a playbook on how to score an AI application on the various aspects of how risk comes in. And if you look at the different areas there are about 10 different areas in which risk can be brought in when AI ecosystems are built. The other interesting thing about the why governments are becoming careful is governments' approach is that in most cases, like in the US and UK and various other places, the government is not using an AI Act to regulate how AI applications are going to be used. Government is already saying that in US and in UK we are see that there exist statutory bodies today. There's SEC, which regulates in financials. There's FTC, which does around marketing and other things. The CFPB, which is consumer financial product. So the EEOC is around HR, right? So these organizations today already have rules and regulations. And these rules and regulations are not going to go away just because you're using AI. So essentially, what they could probably do is be a little bit more stricter or come up with ways in which they want to ensure that the use of AI still does not deviate or does not take the company or the organization away from following the statutory body regulations, and those are regulations I talked about. At least in US, the regulations are the alphabet soup of regulations like A to Z, which govern the different industries in different ways. Now, FDA, for example, has its own set of guidelines, which directives around how to certify medical devices, software as a medical device, and they have various things they expect the software as a medical device company to do when they come in for FDA certification. So that's how the government is going to probably influence the checks and balances on a use of AI within applications or business processes which are affecting the use of an organization's services, goods and services. Does it make sense?
Yes, I think it perfectly makes sense. So I had one curious follow-up question on this one.
Yeah.
So do you envisage that the governments, they will come up with certain tools, or they will say that these are the registered list of vendors for the compliance tools, and you need to use these compliance tools whenever you are doing artificial intelligence modeling or taking a model to production, and you'll have to submit a report saying that since these 5 things are green, your model is certified to go into production. Do you envisage something like this happening?
No. I do not think there will be one part or tool which can do everything, especially because this is a very horizontal applicated technology and can be applied across a variety of domains. So the expertise, like the way, say, the healthcare space, the expertise required in healthcare space to even say what is right and wrong is going to be very different from what the expertise required in a marketing space, right? There are going to be general principles, but which needs to be followed. But I do not expect the tool to be one and the only one. That there isn't going to be a magic box which is going to say yay or a nay and you are in or out. Essentially, I think it all boils down to a set of organizations who are developing AI products or using AI products, showing the intent that they are doing the right things, and as long as they can document that is the intent and the process and which they have done, and can even make it transparent for the consumers. For example, if I'm buying a package software, and this package software is using AI to build do the assessment of me, maybe as I say example, an HR software which assigns resumes to certain job postings, and then the hiring manager takes some action on that on those selected on the reduced list of people on which for him or her to go and look at it. That's a decision which is being taken based for a company by a system. So that system probably needs to have a way in which you want to tell the user of the system or the company to procure the license that, what, I'm doing it this way. This is the way I think it is right, and this is the way we have tested it out, and essentially, 80% or 90% of the these things will fall into certain categories and buckets, and it will work, right? So if you can have that information, and that's a set of that information probably would answer the set of guidelines which the company may have when they're procuring software from vendors, that these are my ethical stuff, this is mission vision, this is what I want to do. I want to ensure that, even the software which does work for me on my behalf, or a consultant or a company which is creating a product for me on my behalf, they ought to follow these guidelines. So as long as they follow those guidelines, I think it's reasonably, I think it's the right path to follow. There isn't there'll always be product, lawsuits and product things going forward, which is there, but the intent is what I think the people want to push forward and make sure that you are not doing something with a bad intent to cause harm, intentionally cause harm to the consumer of your software or a decision process.
Right. The key takeaway here was the intent part, which you mentioned, along with reasonable documentation. Documentation being the hardest thing for enterprises all the time. You're speaking about doing good documentation. So yes, that's an area. So today, every enterprise wants to leverage AI in their business workflows. And as our experiences, we have seen that enterprises are concerned about fairness, safety, transparency, and trust of AI systems. To become AI ready and to implement AI use cases, enterprise need to tackle these issues. So how does Confer.ai tackle these issues?
So Confer.ai is actually helps companies operationalize governance playbook, which these 4 areas are 4 of the 10 factors which we capture. So one of the things which we have done in our product is that that we have realized that legal compliance folks are kind of worried about, or they really don't know what the AI governance playbook should really look like. So our readings of the existing standards or directives come out, like EU Act, NIST ARMF, and Canada stuff, and UK's ICO stuff, or OECD stuff, allowed us to realize that there's about 10 different areas under which all these governance control questions can be grouped. And there are 4 of them which you mentioned: fairness, safety, transparency, and trust. And you can see that, even the executive order which recently came out from Biden talks about ensuring the safety and security of the AI software which is going to be used. He is primarily directed at the federal stuff, because the federal procurement teams insist on that, essentially most software will build that as a core component of their product, and it will be available for all customers. So these are the ones most talked about. Of course, fairness is important, because you don't want a certain segment of the population of your targeted population always to benefit from the decisions which are being made by these AI software. Safety falls into similar into parlance, because just like fairness, safety is something which is like, as are more and more autonomous vehicles and autonomous equipments and autonomous machines are coming out, they need to have a certain set of safety which is what all products should have, right? All industrial products or all in the consumption, even like food has its own safety-related labels so that bad things don't get into the food. So similarly, safety things comes in. Transparency and trust is practically speaking how the system is working for your behalf, right? And one of the interesting things here is that And this is where I think the EU legislature had some issues with foundational model companies. Is people are targeting a lot of these towards directly at the models, because that people think models is the unit of consumption in an organization. But really, if you look at a business, model is not the unit of consumption. An application using an AI, one or more AI models, is the unit of consumption. So, and the example there is like, before copilots, before Gen AI and copilots came in, chatbot was the most ubiquitous application people could think about where AI is being used. And employee chatbot is going to be very different from a customer service chatbot. And the risk which an employee chatbot brings in is going to be very different from a customer service chatbot. And this is where transparency and trust of what data was being used and what models are being used to build an employee chatbot needs to be understood. And what went into build a customer chatbot needs to be understood for, say, a chief risk officer or a CISO or one of the on a C-level or the C-level folks to really prioritize the risk of that use of that particular chatbot within the system. Maybe a customer chatbot has $1 million risk because it may affect the brand of a company, while an employee chatbot has a lot lower risk given the kind of things the chatbot does. So the transparency and trust becomes other important factors. Now, the interesting thing about all the laws and regulations we're coming in, they essentially do focus around these four and maybe many more, like accountability, and there's something around performance, and there's things around human impact, and so there are other factors. So we have observed that all these governance control questions can be grouped under these 10 different factors, which is what Comfort does. So we help you create a playbook. We have the ability to generate these control questions out of different acts coming out, and we do it at scale using generative AI. And then once the control questions have been grouped, they can even be merged, and since we tag them with different groups, if you answer one governance control question, you actually you're actually answering the different articles or different acts. So it improves the productivity significantly. Now, you don't have to run your governance playbook against the different acts and regulations which you want to comply to every time separately. You really run it once, and you are now able to get your score against how compliant you are with the various laws and regulations you care about. Now, that's what Comfort does. It actually helps you operationalize the ability to bring in run the governance playbook and make sure that your risk is scored, you understand what the risk is, and then when the risk has been identified, help you manage and mitigate it. And at any point of time, your AI posture of your compliance against multiple regulations, industry or general regulations, are available to you in a dashboard. And we use the power of generative AI to do all of those without providing additional overhead to the various stakeholders. It's almost like, you are doing less with less, right? You are actually doing less work, but you're getting more productivity, and you used to have less resources, so you actually need to scale to this growing number of regulations. So you're actually being able to improve your productivity significantly with the help of AI to govern your AI solutions.
Great. This is very cool. So I think you mentioned the two use cases, one of the customer co-pilot and one of the employee co-pilot. So I can clearly see that how Confer can help that any enterprise, if they are doing these two different use cases from a governance, risk and compliance perspective. And you rightly mentioned that there are plethora of models that would get built as per the use cases in enterprises, and each one of them will pose different kind of governance or compliance risk which needs to be mitigated, and enterprises would definitely require a platform like this where they can have that one single point of view and then have also the life cycle view right from what you say, the governance to the risk mitigation part. So this brings me to now explainable AI. So can you provide real world example of utility of explainable AI beyond just the regulatory requirements?
Yeah. So I am a personally, I think the explainable AI is a little bit overplayed, because it's coming from the point of view of how a model would do the work, where when people are coming from you know, people came from say a declarative world of writing code based on a logic, which when given a set of input, you would have finite output. Now, the whole world of predictive analytics and generative analytics is completely inverted, where we have a hypothesis and you are trying to prove the hypothesis because you know that the hypothesis can be proved using a data, but you just don't know which function or which kind of function proves that. Now, then that becomes a model, right? And so the model and that model has become very complex, very, very complex now. So it's not it's not possible to convert that into a set of like straightforward rules and regulations where which explains exactly how the model will behave when different type of inputs come in. So and again, as I said, right, just think about the way, and I forget about the models being built inside in-house, but think about even the foundational model. Like you have a large language model called GPT or Cohere something or Mistral something or Anthropic something, some stuff version. Now, that large language foundational model essentially can do a variety of things depending on what you want you to use for. So, if you had to really use the term explainability, it's more interpretability, right? It's basically where the foundational model is being used. Suppose the foundational model is being used to, for example, generate the a summary of a particular paragraph. Now, I have been at ServiceNow before, and I know that we and one of the things we have been trying to tackle is the ability to summarize the case notes when it moves from one customer agent to another customer agent. Now, there are different ways of tackling that, right? There's in summarization itself, this notion of something called abstractive summarization, there's something called extractive summarization. Abstractive summarization is typically what you see at the beginning of our technical paper, which is written, which kind of summarizes the whole paper. But the extractive summarization is more like, okay, this is a paragraph, and just give me the gist of this paragraph, almost but in our case of case summarization, it's even more difficult. It's neither abstractive nor extractive because essentially, as cases move from one end to another agent, a lot of the information which is there towards the end of a case is more relevant than the beginning of the case. Because things have changed, more diagnostics have been done, stuff has been tried out. So it's very, I don't know today if the foundational model will do it a better way or not. But if you think about the explainability of the foundational model to probably solve this particular problem, I bet that there will be a set of probably a few steps you should be taken, that you will do something first using a foundational model, then maybe you'll do some other classification, and then maybe another model, and then end you'll get a result. So one single model no longer gives you the output which you desire. So it's like you're stringing in together a set of decision points and then making some result out of it. So how that entire process is interpreted, or how the process actually works through, is more interesting from an application point of view than a single model's model introspection and trying to understand what that model does. Because the model is going to do different things depending on different times and different types. So the way you're going to retrain the model with a new set of data. So in fact, if you look at the compliance regulations, which we have seen, EU AI Act actually does not have any governance control questions around explainability. literally doesn't have any, because it is dealing with human impact of an AI system, and hence explainability of a single model is not relevant. And I would say maybe many other laws, if you interpret, would probably fall in the same bucket. So we have to think about. That's why the risk of an application when using AI technologies or AI modules is actually a better way of thinking about how whether the product is ready to be used within the context in which it's been built for. That's my
Right.
my viewpoint on explainability,
Yes.
as a practitioner's point of view.
Right, right. I think that is what we are looking for in this podcast series, the practitioner point of view. That is the most important point of view that we want to bring out, and that's one of the reasons why we have started this neural networking series. So thanks for pointing that out. So you talked about a lot of things which the enterprises have to do from a model perspective. You talked about the retraining of pipelines was one of the things. So I want to know from a regulations perspective, do you see the regulations or the compliances, they are more model centric or they are system centric?
I will again posit that model is just one piece of an AI application. Even the rules which are applied on top of a model's output is also important. So essentially, an AI system should be regulated at the point of what the application is doing rather than from the model point of view. But that does not mean that when and we actually do that. In fact, in the Confer as a product, if you look at it, we actually discover the entire lineage of what an application is consuming. So the models an application is using, the data sets on which the model has been trained, or the application's use of certain data sets to retrain it in the context of its use. All of that is that entire visibility is extremely important from a regulatory point of view. You cannot apply the principles of governance if you do not first understand what are the assets on which you want to apply it to. And we define these AI assets not only as application services which consumes models or inference services, it also the data on which is used. So essentially, tomorrow models never be built inside a company, or you may actually end up using inference services from large language model providers or other small language model providers, which may be more specialized in the context in which has been built. Now, each of the model provider probably has to have some kind of a model card or an asset card, as we call it, which describes what it is and what has been done, what kind of things have been taken care of. But that is important, so you can apply your governance, your ethical principles, or your company's mission vision principles stuff to the use of it. But I'll again come back that while you individually apply the governance lens or the compliance lens to these assets, from a risk point of view, it is what the application brings into the organization is what probably is more interesting for an enterprise. So the enterprise needs to evaluate that what we are doing is reasonable, and if there is a risk, there's a way to mitigate the risk or manage the risk, and maybe the risk is small compared to the benefits they are getting. And so at the end of the day, all commercial enterprises will always outweigh, compare benefits to risk, and I think every process or every action has some risk which exists. I don't think any risk can be completely taken away. So, but the visibility to that needs to be understood, and that is where the same yardsticks of governance principles needs to be applied both at the application level, model, and the data feature set level. So you can ensure that the right things are being done. For example, in privacy, right? Privacy, you probably want to ensure that the data you are using for model training or inference or model retraining are follow the privacy rules and regulations. So that even though it may be consumed by a machine and the data may never be seen by a human, but it ought to follow the same principles. So you got to apply the same set of principles at the different levels. But at the end of the day, it is the applications which are being consumed within an organization, and hence from a management point of view, or from what to go or not to do, or use or not to use to make it production or not to make production, probably boils down to understanding the risk which is being brought about at the application level, not at the model level or the data level.
Right.
Not all data is being used anyway from all models. So you may run a GDPR privacy kind of run through all the stuff, which is important for the data you store, but some models may probably use only a fraction of the data you're storing in your systems anyway, to start with.
Right. So here you talked about the lineage part, and also you talked about how it is important to connect the whole thread from data to model to system. We talk about the fairness, safety, transparency, and trust of AI systems. But what we are observing also is that enterprises, they are battling with issues such as there is no single version of truth for the data, or non-availability of data lineage. There are issues with poor data governance. So in these cases, how does an enterprise ensure that there is the fairness, the safety, the transparency, and trust in the AI systems?
Yeah, so that will of course depend on domain to domain. I don't think there is a one size fits all answer to this question. There is also a notion of independent verification and validation. So you could have certain organizations who are responsible for putting, say, a seal of, like, this is have done the right way, actually do an independent verification validation of your systems and processes. That can always be done because it would need, as I said, it would need a specific domain knowledge. For example, in HR systems, EEOC has a rule called the 4/5 law. It's called 4/5 law, 4/5 rule, or something like that. So if you are able to satisfy the 4/5 rule and regulation, then you're pretty much, even though you may not be able to service a certain percent of the population correctly, but you are, as far as the regulation is concerned or the law is concerned, you are in compliance with the law. Right. So, but the interpretation of the 4/5 regulation of the law may actually vary from, say, domain to domain or a particular use case to use case. Now, the different, and then, for example, the GDPR, the data privacy laws and regulations, they may be very data-centric as to who's accessing it, where it is stored, how long is retained, when it needs to be deleted, what process needs to be in place to ensure that somebody is asking for their personal data has been deleted at a certain time. Now, it does not, many a times I do not think it addresses a notion like, suppose I built a model using data from an European customer, can I use the model in US? I think the legal interpretation is actually you can, and I don't think it's been tested. But those are the gray areas where different organizations may actually have a different standard operating procedures. Now, because models may not actually have the actual data, they may actually have an, variation, have a, I would say, an analogous representation of the data in some, bits and some numbers and weights and proportion and frequency and stuff like that, rather than the data itself. Now, but whether it's relevant for whether the information captured from an European demography is relevant to a US demography is something which only the application developers of that particular organization knows about, and why it is relevant and whether it's relevant or not. Now, so those are things which are a little bit more nitty-gritty. And when people ask me, I talk about the standard notion of US jurisprudence, where there's a difference between a judge and a jury. And there's a lot of things has to be done from a judge's point of view, where the judge actually interprets, creates a standard procedure in which you to collect the evidence, which is something what a comfort does. It actually allows you to capture all the things which has been done to ensure that the companies are compliant to various regulations. But then the jury actually interprets that data collected to make a verdict on whether it is actually compliant or not. So in this case, auditors and other things may step in and then use the information to ensure that they are in compliant to the regulations that the industry is being governed by. So it's a little tricky, and there may be specific things you may have to do for complying to other regulations which may not be AI centric, because the data privacy has nothing to do with AI, right? It's a data retention and storage and usage policy, and it is every transaction system you're using inside your company, from marketing to sales to operations, will have to follow the same set of data privacy rules.
This
right?
was yes. So this was very helpful. So the next one, which I now come to, is the responsible AI. So we have seen that traditionally every big organization in high tech like Microsoft, or you take example of Google or Facebook, so they have come up with certain guidelines or frameworks or toolkits. That's what they say from a responsible AI perspective. But according to you, what will be the top 5 things an enterprise should keep in mind from a best practices perspective that you would recommend to the enterprises?
I don't think we have enough information to create a 5 best tips practice yet, because this is a very, very nascent area, right? It's like we are probably at the tip of a large iceberg, right? So we don't even know what the size of the iceberg below is, right? So but one of the things I would say between a large companies and medium and bigger size and small size companies, large companies can do a lot of stuff because they have the resources to come up with all this, to do specific stuff around this area. For a smaller company, following a large company principles can actually become much more onerous, and it could be regressive to their competition ability for them to innovate. So they probably would want to do it in a very standardized form. And here I would say that a product like Confer actually helps medium-sized other industries to use a standardized approach and using a governance by design principle to start thinking, just layering the governance principles right from when doing the work, rather than post hoc, because once things have been done, it's very hard to change, and then it becomes much more intrusive for the company. So the most important principle I would say is, think about governance right from the point you're thinking of the product, and ensure that at least the various factors under which the questions show up get followed in some form. In fact, one of the POCs we are doing are running the product manager with whom we are working on the product. In fact, I actually remarked the governance control questions which Confer generates could actually become a set of testing and design and testing principles or QA principles which company may adopt in addition to whatever else they have to do for the product to work. And that is the way I don't know what the top 5 principles are going to be, but try to understand the kind of control questions which we can provide to customers who are interested in this, to as the areas in which they ought to have some work or documentation and available. Most likely, most companies actually have the information. They probably don't have it in a way that's consumable. So even and if you can think about it at the point of where you're designing the product and building it out, then you have kind of made it a part of your working system and a working culture, and then everything else after that becomes very smooth.
Right.
Yeah.
The working culture point is the most critical one, where we are going to observe a lot of models getting into production and people interacting with them. So how that thing comes into picture. So what I'm gonna do now is we were collecting as you were giving your valuable insights from a practitioner's perspective. We were in the background also had opened the question thing for the audience. So I'm gonna check with the team if we have few questions coming from the audience that in the last phase of this discussion. We'll take few questions from the audience. So I'm just gonna ask my team here to help me out with the questions. Yeah. So what I've asked them is to copy paste all of them, so that we have it on one screen collated.
Yeah.
So I have the first one. So this is
Sure.
the large language models one. So large language model being top of the talk in the town. So how do we ensure to use LLMs safely in production environment for business use cases where risks are the primary factor? Is the first question.
All right. So if I go back to my talk, there are factors under which you can govern and ensure that your use of large language models are compliant to. Now, the risk comes from either from the factors which are important, not important, right? So safety is one of the factors, and there could be things around performance, there could be things around fairness, there could be things around security. So essentially, you got to understand the context in which you are using the application, and using the large language model within the context of the application in which the application is being built. So that using large language model, and it's like use of use it in one place or multiple places, and end of the day, you still have to have a labeled data set based on which you kind of you ensure that the large language models are not what we call hallucinating, which is not actually trying to answer a question, answer something when it really can't answer, right? You have to force it to say, I don't know. And if you can force a large language model to say, I don't know, in the cases where there's an amount of doubt, and you can only say yes or no, an equivalent of yes or no, whatever the context of the application is, then the I don't know sections and the responses then has to be handled through rules or other ways of the way applications can then solve the problem. For example, I would say if like Goldman Sachs knew when they brought out the Apple Card that they only had more information about the primary folks being men and not women, then they could just have used that decision model only for male applicants and had to run a manual process for the women applicants, and they would have never had the PR problem as they had when it actually showed up. Right. So you got to understand you got to make sure that the context is in which you use is the one in which is most likely to be correct. You don't have to use it for every context. Yeah.
Yes, you gave that Goldman Sachs example there. So the next interesting question that has come from the audience is the AI compliance laws would evolve with further adoption of AI. Could you suggest how companies could develop right interpretation of the regulations without jeopardizing their commercial interests?
Yeah, so I would say, start using Confer ASAP. We will give you as a subscription. You'll get the new interpretations of the laws. You can actually have both. Say if you have an EU Act, say morph from 1.0 to 1.1, and there are certain rules and regulations which went out of phased out or new were added. You can actually score both of them in the same product, and you can see which are the ones which are 1.0 compliant and 1.1 compliant, and what are the things you have to do. So that is actually the premise of the reason of building the software, that you need a standardized way of doing things. And that reduces your cost. If you use a standard product and the number of regulations and your number of assets grow, you're only amortizing the cost of that software across a growing number of regulations, and you can actually scale very well without burdening your operations.
Nice.
And reducing your innovation.
Yes. Nice. So I'll take a couple of more, the last two questions coming from the audience. So this one is also a very cool one, is how does closed AI models governance will come into effect, as no one knows which guardrails they have put?
Yeah, so this is a tricky one. I don't think there is a formal way of fixing this problem. The only way it will come is from the demand from the users of the closed models, right? If you are say for example, you are a very powerful company, you've given a lot of dollars and license fees for using the closed model, and your customers are demanding more transparency and explainability or interpretability, as you call, whatever, and how can I trust them use, and you depend on your closed model provider to give you some answers, then you will actually get the answer. I mean, I think it will happen in a commercial relationship. It cannot happen through enforcement.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. I think that's a fair point that you have made. So the last one is we're going to try what you say a tricky question again. Is so we saw that there was a recent class action suit saga involving the United Health Group, which underlined the real risks of AI for businesses. So we just want to have your view that what responsible AI posture could United Health Group have taken from a responsible AI perspective?
Yeah, I think I have given my comments on that on LinkedIn and somewhere else, but I think that if audit committees and other governance, internal governance groups were tracking the use of AI within an organization more closely, and they would have found this issue, and somebody would have taken a decision to either use it or not use it, but would have taken a very conscious decision on that. So not having a governance playbook in this case probably allowed the use of this model for a certain segment of their population slip through. Now, whether it's right or wrong, probably will get interpreted in the court of law. Now that there's a class action lawsuit, but the key question is how much PR issue was it for United Healthcare now that this thing has come to the fore, and whether that is something they would have wanted to avoid.
Right, right. So I think this comes to our first, the end of the episode, and we are so happy, Devu, to have hosted you here. This was a masterclass for all the audience on the AI governance, risk, and compliance perspective of it, which I feel is the most important one. Which people need to be aware of, because that I feel that is the one which really is going to affect the common audiences who are going to use this technology in their day-to-day life, is my view on that. So thank you again for being here, and we would love to host you again in maybe this in next episodes that we come out. Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Ketan. Happy to be here and happy to participate in this inaugural session of your podcast series.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.